Hello, it's me again. You know that. You're on my channel, or you clicked on this picture at random. Intros are hard. So I want to make a quick video talking about how I choose games or how I plan games. That's sort of what I covered in my last lengthier video. But I wanted to cover a little bit more loosely here about how I latch onto games myself, or how I begin planning a game, or why, or more specifically, why I begin planning a game. I will up front say the long and short of this is sort of another plug for my Start Playing games. I apologise for that, but go join Start Playing and join one of my games, because I need money to keep this channel running. So it does vary, but I haven't often sat down and thought that I really want to play a system. I've never really wanted to play D&D. The possible exception is, of course, Fate. I always want to run Fate. Often it'll be much more contextual, so I'll have an idea for a kind of game or a concept for a rough outline of a story that I want to run, and then the game has sort of fit into it, or there's been specific context for why I'm running that type of game or that system, and then I've been inspired to make a story out of it. There's just lots of ways. Let's just get on with it and break it down. So I'm currently running two D&D games. One, the longest running one, is from a Critical Role fan group. I can't remember precisely how we came together, probably Facebook or something like that. And then they moved on to a Discord server where they started a bunch of games set in Tal'Dorei. All started like 5 years ago or something. And I was one of the early groups. So we had they're all alphabetized, and I'm Group Echo, so we were the fifth group sort of added to there. So I'm pretty sure I was in the first run of when they started out. And there's, I don't know, maybe 30 or so games running on that server, all set in Tal'Dorei, happening between season 1 and season 2 of Critical Role, sort of in the middle gap there. Familiar setting that people want to play in, and people love that show, so it had quite a lot. It built up quite easily. Like I say, they've gone past the Z in the alphabet at this point, so I don't know how many games are running on there, but it's quite a lot. So I found that game through Critical Role. It was always going to be D&D because it's a Critical Role group. I found the group I was playing with previously to that through another Critical Role group that wasn't set in Tal'Dorei, but that was through another sort of fan group. The game that I played in, the first like big D&D game that I ever played in, I found through similar means. And I'm sure I'm not the only person by a long shot who has found D&D through Critical Role. I didn't find role-playing through Critical Role. If you're coming to the channel for the first time, I've been role-playing for a couple of decades, just not playing D&D for some reason. I've been playing a plethora of other games, and my D&D experience was very minimal. And then Critical Role turned me on to D&D, and I'm not... D&D's fine, but I have no nostalgia for it, so I can see the cracks, I think, a bit more clearly than a lot of people can. And there's lots of other systems, and Fate is my favourite system. Lots more narrative systems that I much prefer. And then I started running a few little home games here and there, that had a few sessions and things. I work in film, so I know a lot of actors and performers and people who wanted to get into the games for that kind of side of things, the more role-playing heavy kind of thing. So I knew a lot of people in that area who wanted to do that, and that's how I like to play and run games as well. So that worked out great. We started playing D&D because we all knew what D&D was. I had this collection of other games, Rifts. I've probably still got the most Rifts books, because for some reason that's what we played in school. So I had all these other games that they've never heard of, but they had heard of D&D, so people want to play D&D. And then my home game is some of those same people who were in those earlier, like smaller games, who came to this wanted to play a slightly longer, or tried to be a slightly longer campaign. We had a good run for a while, but it's hard to run a regular game. You've seen all the memes. And again, actors and filmmakers and creative people who want to play a particular style of game that works well for my style that I want to run. I imagine my groups might enjoy a little bit more combat than I'm prepared to run, but I think that on the whole, I think the game works nicely. Both those campaigns have a similar-ish origin, in that the players wanted to run a character-driven story, so they wrote elaborate backstories. Some much more elaborate than others, but they all were into the idea of having a character-driven game that they were able to create. So they wrote backstories, big backstories for their characters, and I then compiled those, brought them all together, and fed them into a story. I brought very little to the start of those games. The context for the world, which was obviously already set in the Critical Role one, we already had all the context in place, and I built the world for my homebrew game. I had a session 0 in mind, so the session 0 that has ended up in both those campaigns, that's its own little mini arc, was slightly detached from whatever else was going on, but I was able to somewhat retroactively at the time feed everyone's backstories into those elements. So the first one was they were being sacrificed for a cult, or that's how the characters met, is they were all kind of captured and were about to be sacrificed on this pyre for this cult, and that's how their party came together. And there's the homebrew one, they were travelling and they found seeking shelter for the night in a storm, they found their way into this haunted hotel basically. And that's kind of the starting adventure for those groups coming together, because the characters didn't know each other before. That's how they met. And then, like I say, I retroactively added their context from their backstories into those story arcs, so that they made sense, and I built from there. But I didn't have that planned at the time. I just had this session 0 and where it could go, and then we kind of improvised from there, filling in the blanks, and then occasionally the best things that happen sometimes are that the players think they figured out context that I hadn't planned, and then I'm like, sure, I'll take that, and I will feed that context, or I'll manipulate it slightly, or I'll do the opposite just to take them by surprise. But they will draw a conclusion that I hadn't made, and then I can either act like, yeah, they did it, so I can then take their ideas and pass them off as my own. But those are the only 2 big D&D games I've run. The issue with D&D, as I've spoken about in previous videos, is I don't really care about it, so I'm not interested in exploring the lore or the game mechanically. It's just not very interesting to me. So I will always have this story out of context of the D&D world, which necessitates me having to homebrew a lot of things, or in other words make stuff up, to have D&D fit into my world rather than having my world fit to D&D. An easy context for that is that the rules of D&D are the restrictions upon the players, not upon the world. So the best example there, I think I've spoken about this in previous videos, is the spell list. The spell list in D&D, those are the spells that the players can learn. That is not the spells that the NPCs or the monsters or whatever are limited by any stretch. I can invent spells. They can just do things that do things. That's absolutely fine. My monsters and things are not obeying the rules because I don't care about the rules. There always has to be logic to what I'm doing. I'm not literally just doing anything. There's players, they can only do so many like very powerful things and lots of lesser powerful things. So I obey the logic of D&D, just not the letter of it. So the players are restricted by the rules, whereas I am not. That's my basic rule for D&D, because that's essentially how most other systems openly work. And D&D has the little thing at the beginning like, yeah, feel free to make up whatever, but it doesn't like it fits worse in D&D doing that kind of thing, unless you're like very good at it, which I am very good at it, not to brag. But yeah, that's the context for those games, is that they are me creating, me writing, me inventing, and then D&D is what the players are doing. D&D is what's kind of tacked on, what's attaching the players to my story. So that's the context I want to run D&D in. I do have some D&D games that I'm looking to run on StartPlaying, because D&D is still the most popular game, but again, they will come with that caveat. I am running a narrative, story-driven game that just is using D&D as its framing, but it is not obeying the letter of the law that is D&D, because it doesn't interest me to do that. I'm sorry, it just doesn't. So the games I'm planning currently on StartPlaying, the seed of the idea is I want to run a level 1 campaign and a level 10 campaign, because they are quite disparate entities. The level 1, I won't give any spoilers, but the context of which is that the players already know each other, so they're going to build characters that are a unit already, and they're going to be, the campaign is called Nobody Gets Out Alive, and it's going to be them in a very harsh, high magic world, where things are extremely dangerous, and they're kind of a part of a group of wandering adventurers who is essentially a career path, doing, who are expected to travel about and doing jobs, and there's more many groups of adventurers who do this. It's a career choice adventuring in that world, because somebody's got to do it, and there'll be like little monsters and things and all sorts of crazy things happening all over the place. The level 10 setup, I'd like the players to not be know each other. The context there is that they are each the only member of their respective parties who still wants to keep going. Like, all their parties are retiring or leaving or deceased or whatever, and they are the only members left of their party who still wants to go ahead and carry on into high level D&D, as it were, and that's sort of what brings them together. Again, I don't want to give any spoilers away, but it interests me that to run a game of the players meeting in a high level context and being established in a low level context in a very dangerous world. Thing is that I do want to run them off the players' backstories, so there's only so much preparation I can do. Similar to my 2 home games, there's only so much preparation I can do because I want to build the story. Building the story is what interests me. Writing a story in advance and just like plodding the players through it doesn't interest me. That's why I don't run modules. I like the idea of creating. It's the creative side of gaming is what I enjoy, and at the end of the day, I have to enjoy it, otherwise why would I ever do it? The other thing that I of course want to run is Fate, because as I keep saying, it's my favourite game. Now I'd love to run a Fate game from scratch. I think the problem with, obviously, it's going to be easier to pitch D&D and to a degree Pathfinder and other similar systems on that kind of network, because that's what people come there wanting to play or thinking they want to play. So I'm sort of hoping to draw people in with some more structured systems, but I would love to play the less structured system of Fate, and I think that a lot of people will get a real kick out of it, especially if you're a more narrative driven person. So I want to run a Fate core, just raw, just a blank slate, get some players in, and we'll build the game and the world and everything from scratch. That, I think, is going to be the hardest sell, because people are looking at it and I'm just saying, I just want to run a game with very little context for what the game is, and that's going to people are going to find that confusing, I'm 100% sure, and not really understand. So I'm going to have to word that one very carefully and make sure I make sense what I'm saying. So I do have a game set up called Write Your Own Fate, which is not a bad title anyway. But yeah, it's just a Fate core campaign from scratch. Build a game. It's a game. Let me say it's a game for GMs. So if you have GM aspirations, Fate core is a good way to start sort of playing and learning how a creative narrative driven system works. But again, yeah, it's kind of the blank slate thing is quite hard to pitch. So I'm pitching another Fate game called These Things That Never Happened. This is me manipulatively getting the Fate rules into what looks like a structured story but actually isn't. So the context for this one is that the players, when it's set in modern day, everyday normal world as we would understand it, but when the players dream, they enter this kind of fantastical land, and they've consistently been having the same dreams to the point where they've started sort of sharing their dreams online, and it's transpired that a group of them have all been dreaming of the same place and the same kind of events and the same things happening. So they've all been kind of collectively dreaming this place, and they have been discussing it online, and then they've decided to try to attempt to meet in the dream. So they've been working in their dream worlds. They've been trying to travel to the same location, and they've eventually, in a dream, all arrive at the same place at the same time. And we're going to pick up there as like, what's the deal with this dream world that they all seem to be sharing? And so they're going to have a real world character and a dream world character, and the dream world, the fantastical setting of that, is somewhat open to interpretation. So that's kind of where the Fate's going to come in. That's kind of where we're going to build the world and understanding of it, with the framing of the real world adventure, which will matter. The real world, it's not just a framing device. Them trying to figure out what's going on, why this world exists, why they're all dreaming the same thing. I have some context for that in mind, but that's the opening of the thing, that they have this shared dream, that they are trying to comprehend how that's even possible. I think that's an easier pitch, because it has a structure and a story, and it's quite an intriguing mystery, and it's a sneaky way of getting like the fake core, sneaking the fake core rules in to be to not trick people, but you know what I mean, into playing Fate. So yeah, I think that's going to be hopefully that'll maybe have a bit more luck. Hard to say. Fate of Cthulhu, on the other hand, which I'm also advertising, automatically comes with its own structure, so that's a bonus for that. So it has the structure that the players are time travelers. That's how the Fate of Cthulhu works, coming back from the future, where post-apocalyptic Cthulhu-verse future, where some eldritch horror has destroyed everything, or something is destroying the world, and they come back with their knowledge and understanding of the future back to the present day, to try and stop the events from happening. There's kind of I was going to say mood board, but I don't know if that's the correct thing. But there's a contextual sheet for it where there are 4 events. I'm doing this because I'm assuming there's a graphic going to be here. There's 4 events that they know about that they need to change in order for the future to be saved. So they will try and change those events, and there's criteria for that. It's a lot more structured than regular Fate, and it has its own world and scenarios. There's scenarios listed in the back that you obviously don't have to stick to, and I sort of will make modifications of them. But it's Fate but with structure, which is quite good. And again, slightly easier pitch, to be like, here's a plot line that you need to solve. That's called And Then the World Ended. So I've got a campaign of that called And Then the World Ended. Currently, every other Tuesday night, that one's listed for. The other 2 campaigns, the 2 Fate campaigns, are sort of they're up in the air as to when they might be. I hope to put some content in soon, but I'm trying to do Fridays and Saturdays. But again, links below to check out my calendar and everything else and what I've got going on. But yeah, if I can get the Fate of Cthulhu, I'm going to concentrate on for a bit. Every other Tuesday, starting next Tuesday, or just advertise next Tuesday. The game then doesn't start until it's filled up. But yeah, starting next Tuesday, I'm going to try advertising every other Tuesday to run Fate of Cthulhu. So that's the context of me wanting to run Fate, and then in a continually being sponsored by Evil Hat, which I'm not, but I might as well be. I'm going to start running Monster of the Week, and it's quite inspiring. It's quite a good system, I think, for a limited run campaign, and it's quite an easy pitch because it's designed to be episodic. So if you don't know, Monster of the Week is kind of as it sounds. It's designed to be run in a kind of TV show like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, supernatural kind of way, where the players are picked from a list of archetypes, such as the chosen one and the freak and the whatever the hell, the expert. Like there's archetypal things that's powered by the apocalypse. I don't have time to explain what that is now, but just know that it's a recognizable system that a lot of games use. But yeah, so the players are designed to fill these archetypes of this adventuring group, for lack of a better term, who will fight a different monster every week in a TV show episodic structure. So the context works quite well, I think, in the StartPlaying format, and as a writer that is structurally quite easy to put together and to have an idea. So I've got 2 campaigns listed on my StartPlaying for that. The first being called They See You When You're Sleeping. So the context there is that the players are each the survivors of their own personal horror stories, so a personal horror movie essentially. They are the final girl or guy of that story, and they survived, they took down whatever it was, but then a powerful psychic has sort of sought them out, these survivors, and brought them together to try and help explain the things that happened to them. They say they're not isolated incidences. They are a part of a kind of ongoing onslaught of these things called nightmares that are plaguing the world. So the players are then brought together to try and neutralize some of these nightmares and figure out where they're coming from and what they're doing and what they're about, if there's any kind of uniformity to them. Yeah, that's the context for that one. So the players are kind of a group of monster hunters brought together by their shared trauma. And the second campaign I want to run for that is called These Violent Delights, which is my desire to run a noir game. So noir horror set in the city of Cindermorn, which is plagued by horror. It's very Dresden Files-esque, which I'm aware that the Dresden Files is a module for Fate. I've not played it, I've not run it, I don't know what it's like, but that is more or less what I'm proposing to run. So the players are a group of investigators who either purposefully travel together or just happen to travel in the same circles and end up working together to try and tackle this city. And so rather than have the previous session, the they see you when you're sleeping, is going to be more about the players traveling from one incident to another, in X-Files style, I guess, kind of going from one horror story to another, kind of floating about, picking out things, whereas these Violent Delights is going to have a singular setting of this city with more about repeat characters, more about repeat environments and NPCs, and a larger context of the happenings within the city. So that's going to be a bit more. So they're going to be quite different. There's quite different structurally, and that comes from a desire for me wanting to run those types of stories. They just happen to fit the Monster of the Week format quite well, but those kind of ideas I had before picking up Monster of the Week, I had those kind of story ideas in mind, and just Monster of the Week just happens to fit that scenario. And it's my newest book, so it's my newest game, so I would just want to run it. It just looks really fun. So for those, and including the these things that never happened, the Fate game, those are structurally just stories that I had in my head, or kind of the junk drawer of ideas that just needed some kind of context attaching to them. And they were just like, I wanted to tell that kind of story in that kind of setting, and say that concept, and then just kind of added a game onto it, rather than being like, I really want to run this game here, structuring idea. I have the idea of the story, and then I add the game on top of it, in order to and then I kind of balance it out from there. And when I choose a game, that's often how it will go. I'll often have, I have an opening idea, or I have a overarching plot, or I have some kind of context element for the world that I really want to run, and then I will find the game that fits onto it. And that's one of the reasons Fate is my game of choice, is because it's an open system. It fits to any context, to any story, to any setting. We ran a pirate Fate game, we've run a space Fate game, I've run all sorts of contexts of Fate games. The one that will come on this channel shortly is a fairly generic fantasy type setting. You can add anything onto Fate, so I think that's why it works for me, is because I have the story concept, I have the seed of the idea, and then I can add a game on top of that, and I can add Fate on top of anything pretty much. But like I say, I understand that Fate's a hard pitch. It's a very unusual game. It's very different. It's very much the opposite end of the spectrum to like your Pathfinders and your D&Ds. Very much so. I would quite like to run Traveller on StartPlaying, but I think the issue here, one of the reasons it's easier to run D&D than some of those other crunchier systems, is that those systems kind of rely on the players having access to the content. You're going to be very much struggle to run D&D if your players don't have access to the player's handbook. And this is why things like D&D Beyond and stuff are fantastic boons, because you can just, as the GM, you can buy those books on there, or have those digital copies of those books, and then just give the players access to whatever they need. These games, however, they don't need that. They don't need that for these kind of the more Fatey kind of narrative games. The players don't need access to anything. I can run Fate straight off. The players don't even need to have read this book. They don't need to have access to this book. There's nothing, because it's so open, there's nothing in this book that is particularly of use to the players. I can then teach it to them straight off of there, and just with me having the reference to it, and that we can just go from there, and they can fill in the blanks without needing to constantly refer back to a rule book to understand what's going on. No, it doesn't hurt to have the rule book. It doesn't hurt to be able to look up your own own answers. Obviously that doesn't hurt at all, but you don't need it, and you don't need it for Cthulhu or Monster of the Week, or any of the games that I'm running. I don't want to run something on here that is going to force the players to buy materials, which is why I feel like Traveller's going to be tricky. Again, not impossible, but just those crunchier, more complex kind of games just are better facilitated by the players having access to the books. So I might attempt it at some point, but I'm a bit wary of trying to figure out if we can play it without the players being able to immediately look up things, being able to immediately look up the rules, or look up the equipment list, or look up something that is relevant to them. So it is an awkward one, and it is why D&D kind of prevails because it's the easiest one to have access to, and a lot of players will, people will sort of have the books because they want to. And the flip side of that is that once players start buying D&D stuff, they will assume they have to buy things for other games. So it's like, oh, this game sounds fun, but I don't want to have to buy the book. We don't have to buy the book. Monster of the Week sounds fun. You don't have to buy the books. I can provide you with the materials that you need, are pretty much available on Roll20, or otherwise character sheets and things, as well as the archetype lists, and you can just go from there. You don't have to buy this book or read this book in order to play. I can run the game for you without it, and you're not getting a lesser experience compared to like D&D. You're still playing the breadth of the game. It's just a simpler system with less fluff, and you having to little bits of rules here and there that you have to keep constantly looking up, partly because it doesn't have the combat system. So the combat system is kind of what bogs D&D down, and those similar systems. So that's a whole other thing. I talk about that on the channel all the time, how I think there's a wild disconnect between the war game that is of D&D and the actual like role-playing game. I talk about that enough. So at the moment I'm trying to advertise games that I'm confident that I can run without asking too much of the players, like games that I can teach to people quite efficiently, without having to put a burden on them to have to learn and read and plan and like understand the game, which D&D doesn't have. D&D has that burden that the players have to know and understand a lot more than they might be able to handle, and that's why D&D often gives people a false impression that the hobby is very complicated, and it isn't. You can play those complicated games, and I've enjoyed playing those complicated games, but I played Rifts, for crying out loud. Rifts is a ludicrously overstuffed game, but yeah, you can enjoy the hobby and get into the role playing of it without having to deal with all that. So I'm hoping that's something that I can offer. I can offer a more narrative-led role-playing experience for people that don't necessarily want the rules crunch, and can just want to do some role-playing and they've got their own crunch to them, these games, but there's not like that heavy expectation of having to learn a textbook of information. The only other thing that I will probably run on StartPlaying is Paranoia. I would love Paranoia. Happy to run Paranoia. That's a super simple drop in, drop out, some one shots here and there. Just jump in. I'll run the modules because I like the modules in Paranoia. It's one of the few games I will run modules for, because I think they're really well written. Very funny game where the players are disposable cannon fodder in a series of missions that are way above their pay grade and way out of their control. The players are not going to save the world in Paranoia, and they're going to be lucky if they can just survive the onslaught of things that are happening to them. You don't need to understand Paranoia. In fact, it's against the rules to understand Paranoia. It is against the rules to show knowledge of the rules, so the players are actually it's fine for the players to come in completely blind with no idea what they're doing. That's kind of the mantra, that's kind of the on theme for Paranoia, for you to not know what you're doing. But yeah, hopefully that was interesting and vaguely insightful and gave you an idea of what I'm up to there. Like I say, I've got the mega game coming up on February the 10th, so if you are going to be at that, then I look forward to seeing you there. It's going to be a lot of fun. So again, my Cthulhu inspired Secrets of Arkham game. That's the third run of that. Is coming up on April the 6th. Tickets are on sale now. I need to update that at some point, but yeah, tickets are currently on sale, so please jump on that. I'll put links below to all these things. We've got TwinCon coming up middle of February, which I'm usually at. In fact, I've almost always been at TwinCon. I'll be running some Dread, hopefully, and some Fate of Cthulhu and teaching Fiasco, so I'll be running a number of games at TwinCon. Hopefully that was interesting, hopefully that's been intriguing. If you are interested in playing a game, do check out my StartPlaying. Again, the links are all below, or join my Discord. Again, the invite link for Discord is below. You can see a lot of what's going on there. We recently did like a test run of the online version of the mega game, which went quite well, got a lot of useful notes. I'm planning to then run that later in the year properly, like fully. That would be quite good. I think that went the structurally trying to get the structure in place was basically the point of running that, and I think we got a good structure in place. Thank you for watching. Check out all my other videos, check out all my other just giving my philosophy on running games. I'm not like an in-depth researcher or a expert on role-playing games. I'm simply here to give my philosophy on how I like to run games, why I like to run games, and the kind of games that I run. So I, as a writer and filmmaker, the way that I want to tell this collective story of these games by working with the players is what interests me. So that's kind of what I want to talk about. Again, check out all the links below. We have a Ko-fi support page. All donations are massively appreciated. Everything we've had so far is amazing, to help kind of keep this channel afloat and fund all our other projects. Hopefully more and more things coming soon. But yeah, thanks for watching. The end. Like and subscribe. I forget to say like and subscribe. Do the YouTube things. Click on the YouTube buttons.